Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you see I have hair in my mouth, so forgive me for that. I am really excited for this episode because so much of what we talk about here, in addition to the physical organization, is about the relationship with our stuff, the relationship with people, and how when we live with spouses and kids or parents, how we deal with our physical stuff can manifest itself unhealthily, if that's a word, in relationships, or how if one person is holding all of the weight and feel all the responsibilities on them versus somebody else that feels like they're just floating through life doing their thing, how that can cause tension in relationships. And communication and couples and families is a huge part of what I do. And people always say, you're kind of part therapist. And I'm like, I laugh, haha, unlicensed therapist, but there's an element of truth to it. But I do like to refer to the experts in these situations. And so today I am bringing you a leading expert in this space, and I could not be happier. So I'm going to bring her out in a minute, but just to tell you a little bit about her. So joining me is Liz Earnshaw. And Liz is she does a lot of things. So I'm just going to start rambling them off. So she is the founder of the company Ours, where she's a licensed marriage. And if I'm misquoting you, Liz, when you come out, you can correct me. So licensed marriage and family therapist. She works to help make couples therapy mainstream, which I'm all about couples therapy. I've been in couples therapy. I talk all about it. She also owns a Better Life Therapy in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And so she helps a team of other clinicians with marriage, family, couples therapy. She also, a lot of you know her because she has a huge Instagram following, and she's really brought therapy into the mainstream. And again, when we talk about our love-hate relationships with social media, one of the beautiful things is to really normalize therapy as not something that needs to be your dirty little secret. And I love that she's been able to use this platform in such a healthy way. She's an ally of the LGBTQIA community. She's awesome. And when I was connected with her, I was like, I have to have you on the show because you are exactly what we need to talk about the connection between organizing your stuff, relationships, time, all of the things. So she's going to fill in all the blanks and correct me on any of the things that I misquoted. But without further ado, let me welcome my new friend, Liz, to the show. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like this is a topic that causes so much distress in relationships, but nobody talks about it.
Totally. I say all the time, people feel that clutter is their dirty little secret, and it doesn't have to be, but they think I have to be all together and my house has to be all together and my schedule, but really behind closed doors, they feel like a bit of a hot mess. And like you, I want to normalize it. We need tools in our toolbox. We need skills. We need to know how to navigate different seasons and situations. And mine has been primarily focused in the tangible clutter. And yours is more on the relational side. So obviously I gave a really big broad stroke overview of who you are and what you do, but can you just fill in the blanks for our folks about your many businesses and what you do, how
You did such a great job. I feel
I was like, she's got a lot. I don't think I'm doing it right, but she'll correct me. So
you did great. Yes, I have a lot. So as you can imagine, I have a lot of clutter in my life too. I need you. So yeah, I'm the co-founder of a company called Ours. We are trying to make relationship wellness mainstream, like you said, and helping people to understand that taking care of your relationship isn't something that has to be like hidden behind closed doors. The same thing that you were just saying about clutter, right? Is it's like, I could relate to what you were saying. I hired a cleaning professional the other day, and the whole time I'm walking around my house, like, I'm really sorry. That'll be picked up when you come back. And it's like, there's so much shame. And the same thing for relationship health, where it's like, people are like, they'll call the office and say, I know this might sound really bad, but we get in these arguments and XYZ happens. I'm like, no, just like clutter and mess, couples fight. That's just what happens. And so I really want to normalize that people argue, that they sometimes don't feel passionate about each other, that they don't always know how to organize their lives together. And it's not as easy as it should, as easy as it looks on TV. And so that's something I'm trying to do with Ours. I also, like you said, I have a practice in Philadelphia and New Jersey where I support therapists in doing couples therapy, and I share free info on Instagram. I have a book that recently came out.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention your book. I had it literally in my show notes, and I had the book, and I apologize. We're going to obviously link to it, but yes,
please.
Congrats. Yeah, talk about the book a little bit too.
Yeah. So the book was recently released, and it's a guide for being in a relationship, really. It's written for anybody who's in a romantic partnership, who is a human being, because we all have challenges in our relationships, and it just kind of gives tangible suggestions for how you can have conversations and how you can create connection and recover after things don't go well. And so yeah, that's out in the world now too. So those are kind of all my different things, the different hats that I wear.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm somebody also that you're kind of all in the same lane. I mean, you're all in the same field, but you have all these different things. And I'm that way too. I have the podcast, and then I have my private clients, and I also write, and then I have my B2B people where I have my other professional organizers. So I can completely relate to that juggling act. But again, it all funnels under the same umbrella. And I love that.
It fits together. We're busybodies. We just can't stay still.
No, that I definitely can't. And, this again, and I said this at the top of the episode, and I said this, offline, I think this is really an important conversation to be had, because there's so much with lack of communication between couples, especially, and I see this all the time on my end, and I'd love to see how that plays out from your perspective on the other side, where I'll go into somebody's house, or I'll be giving a workshop, and I'll be talking, and they're like, I am doing everything. And it could be the woman, it could be the man, but it's like, I am doing 90%. I feel like I take care of all the responsibilities around the house, from like the upkeep, from the landscaper to, we need the plumber. I do all of that. I do all the shopping. I do all the meal prep. I do all the laundry, fill in the blanks. and then somebody else, and then they feel like the other spouse isn't pulling their fair share. And what I see a lot of times is the not having the communication tools, and people feel like they should just know, like, you should just know that I am doing it all. And where a lot of times people are just oblivious. And especially when it comes to clutter, I call it being clutter blind. Like, they're just legit.
They just don't see it.
They don't see it.
Yeah.
And they don't always see the stress and anxiety, because they're just not aware. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or a bad spouse. It's just, you don't either, maybe you were modeled in a different type of home growing up, whatever the situation is. But I see this as a source of contention more often than not. And so again, that's where people say, well, you're kind of like part therapist. And I joke, haha. But in all actuality, I think there's a huge piece there that we can address. And I'm wondering if you could just speak into that a little bit.
It's huge. So as a couples therapist, when couples come into the office, one of the first things I talk about is this issue with them, because people don't know to identify it this way, right? So they'll come in and they'll say, we're fighting all the time. We're exhausted. We spend no time together. They're a jerk, whatever. And when we step back and I'll kind of check in on certain things, one of the things I ask is, well, how do you handle roles in the household? How are you navigating keeping the house clean? How are you navigating who takes care of the bills? How are you navigating who's the one that leaves work when the kids need to be picked up because they're sick? And all of a sudden, all of this stuff will come out, right? Oh, it's all on me and they never help and I'm exhausted. And I feel like they keep asking us to have, they keep asking me to have more sex. And I don't want to have sex because all day long I've worked and then I have to step over shoes and da 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 da. And so this is one of the biggest issues, I would say, particularly for couples who are in that young professional stage where they have younger kids, they're working, and there is no balance. It feels very unfair how things in the house are being delegated and navigated.
Yeah. I see it from my end as well. And I can second that. And, it was, I get that a lot where people start to then become resentful because they feel that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. Or my spouse is just expecting me to do it. Like the maid fairy person is going to it's just going to appear like everything's going to get done. And I'm not saying that there aren't people where there's, an imbalance, where there are people that truly are jerks or expecting things. But in my experience, I think so much of it is people just don't know. They're just unaware. And it's, again, I do a lot of work about studying personality types and the why of clutter. And one of the things is, I'm like a little crazy.
I love that.
Oh yeah. We can talk about that. That's a whole other.
I want you to tell me what my problem with clutter is.
No.
You need to
Okay. Well, do you know about the Enneagram?
Yes.
You do?
I do know about the Enneagram. I forget what number I am.
Do you know what I was going to ask you what your Enneagram type is. So I have a whole framework that I've been studying and researching for the past 4 years now, looking really unpacking the Enneagram and looking at how your Enneagram type relates to how you navigate clutter, right? Because we all have some sort of clutter, whether it's calendar clutter, like you and I, who are just doing so many things, or it's physical clutter, emotional, like the guilt, fear. So we all, some people are just dominant in certain areas than others. And how we relate to it, I see the connection points, not that if you are a certain type, that means you have that, but these are certain characteristics of people that this is a natural strength of yours. And this is an area where you might struggle. So I have, through that research that I've been doing, I really do have found that there are people that just truly have blind spots with certain areas. And we all expect people, myself included, like I said, I wish I had this insight when my kids were younger, in the early years of my marriage, but we just assume that everyone sees the world through our lens, like the same way that we see it. And that comes in relationships, and that comes when it comes to clutter and organization. And the things that keep us up at night are not the same things that necessarily keep our spouse up at night. And so having that understanding allows people to have some sort of grace, and then tools in their toolbox to have language. I think it's important to have the language, because what I see, like you said, a lot of times people just know that they're angry. They know that they're bitter. They know that they're resentful. They know that their husband is like, I don't want to be anywhere near you, but they don't have the language to understand where that's coming from and to articulate it.
Absolutely. And I love that you normalized that it's really common for there to be somebody in the partnership who just doesn't see it, or they see different clutter than you do, right?
Yes.
Like I'll work with couples and the one person will be saying, you've been stepping over the things at the bottom of the steps for a week, and I can't believe you don't care that that heavy box is there. And the other person will say, well, our schedule's a mess and you literally pack it full of all these sports things for our kids and da 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 da. And that's why I haven't taken the box upstairs, right? So there's different levels of what matters to people, what they value, all of those types of things. And then there's socialization. And what happens is that we forget about this socialization, and instead we start to try to find character flaws in the other person. And we say, I'm just going to use my husband as an example. Like, Andrew, you're always walking all over everything. You don't care that there's trash bags sitting there. You don't care that the Christmas decorations haven't gone away. You're this and you're that. So I'm telling him that he's got character flaws, right?
Yes. You attack the person.
I'm attacking him. He's a problem. But when I can step back, and this doesn't give an excuse for not having a fair distribution in the home, but when I can step back and I can say, well, what happened here in our lives that would make it so that maybe my husband doesn't notice that there has been a box at the bottom of the steps for a week? Socialization has happened at a very young age. And this is gender stereotyped. And of course, it can be different depending on other factors. But at a very young age, girls in general are taught to pay attention to these things. They're given little kitchen sets. They're, told to put the doll babies in cute little outfits and to organize them into little baskets in the playroom and da 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 da. And boys are outside kicking balls around and throwing things and getting dirty and throwing their clothes on the floor and all sorts of stuff. And then we grow up and we get into relationships. And we've also watched other people be in relationships. And what the majority of us have seen in the home is that one person takes care of all of what's called the invisible load or the mental load. And we see that person, generally the mother, doing all the things, calling the doctors, opening the mail, being the one who gets the mail out of the mailbox and brings it in, being the one who recognizes that the sheets need to be changed and that the shoes need to be taken out of the closet because they're too small and put in the basement in a box that's labeled and da 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 da. We see one person doing that and we see the other person taking a very different role. And so when we grow up, whoever we identified with as a child, we take on that role and we take it on very unconsciously. But unfortunately, we become very conscious about how angry we are about it and we fight. Instead of stepping back and saying, I think I took a lot of unconscious roles on that I don't want anymore, and I want us to really explore this together, we say, you should have, you didn't, you never, I hate you, all of those types of things. And it doesn't need to be that way.
I love that. And I think I'm just in 100% shaking my head in agreement. Do you feel like, and I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to hear it, like for people that are listening out there that go, I'm in that state right now. Right. I am not happy right now and we've developed patterns, whether you're married for 5 years or 15 years or 20, because I'm older than you. So I'm in a season of life, for me, like we're 20, 25 years in, and I see these patterns and I see a lot of my friends with teenage kids, and the kids have picked up the unhealthy habits and they've watched poorly modeled where one person's doing everything for everybody. Is there hope for people for change? And if so, how do you even begin that dialogue? If you, again, have to because I think a lot of times with clutter, I see people go, well, I'm just disorganized, right? I just wave my white flag and say, well, I'm just, I've always been disorganized. I grew up in a disorganized house. I have to be. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Maybe you have to work a little harder to change the behavior, that wasn't healthily, modeled for you, but it's a learned skill. How do you feel about people that are in relationships where it's been 10 years for so long? Because I feel like by the time people come to you, a lot of times they're at the breaking point.
Yeah, they have had children for many years at that point. They're just like, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to lose it. Yeah, there's a lot of hope. And like you said earlier, some people are just jerks. So you'll bring this conversation up and they'll say, well, that's your role. I don't care, but most of the time what I see, and truly most of the time what I see is that once this is brought into awareness, most people are like, oh, okay, I get it. They're not going to change overnight, right?
No.
Because these are habits and patterns. And you see that I'm sure people pay you all this money to come help with their homes. And then like a week later, they've brought in like 800 other things. And you're like, what the heck is happening?
Well, because again, I tell this to people, because your patterns, you spend a lifetime developing this, behaving a certain way, responding to, I get stressed, I go shopping, as a reward. Some people eat, some people shop, some people do, whatever it is. And so now we're going to be taking these incremental steps to change that. It doesn't happen overnight. Your clutter didn't appear overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. And the same, I would think, with relationships.
Absolutely. So the first step to bringing this up is awareness. And that might look like being in a couples therapist's office, and the couples therapist is the one that says, can you both make a list of what you're doing in the house so that we can see what that looks like? Or let me give you a little psychoeducation around what the mental load is, or whatever. It might also just be sharing with your partner this podcast, or sharing with your partner an article. When my husband and I had our child, he was about 1 year old, and I lost it. I was like, I cannot be the only one in this house being like, there's a doctor's appointment today. The light bulb has been out. I need somebody to go change the laundry in the basement. I don't want to be the home manager anymore. Right. I totally lost it. And I remember I came across an article, or actually a cartoon it's really, really good. It's called You Should Have Asked. And I showed it to my husband. And so for anybody listening, I have used this for people to show to their partners, and it works because it is not mean. It is kind of funny and it's relatable. And my husband looked at the cartoon, which kind of demonstrates this person taking care of all the clutter in life, right, and the partner going, oh, well, if you would have just asked me, I would have done it. And the person's like, are you kidding? I don't want to ask you.
And that, yes. I love it.
If you have a partner, you can show them something like that. It's not, you don't have to enter this aggressively or by pointing out a failing. You can say, hey, I relate to this. Do you relate to it? And my husband was like, yep, I can see why that would be frustrating. I can now see what this looks like for you.
Right. And again, I wrote an article over a decade ago. It was one of the first things I actually published when I started my business, and it was called Being the CEO of Your Home. And it was an article about, and again, this could go for whoever was the primary caretaker, but I was speaking as a mom at the time. My kids were younger. They were 5 and 7. And I had spent some time as a stay-at-home mom. I'd been a working mom. And I wrote this article talking about how you have to run your home like a business, and just like a CEO of an organization doesn't do all the things. They delegate. They either delegate in-house to the people that work for them or work with them, or outsourcing. And you have to, at some point, maybe this is my Enneagram 8-ness, because I'm an Enneagram 8. So I see things in very black and white and not a lot of emotion. I look at things from a strategic level. So probably that has a lot to do with it. But how, for me to effectively run the house, because I was the one that was the primary, home manager, so to speak. It doesn't mean that I have to do the execution of all these things. It meant that I was at home and I was in charge of making sure that, okay, so whether I organize my calendar to know okay, the first of the month, we need to change out the filters. So I could say, it could come up and I could go, hey, Josh, we need to get the filters changed. Or maybe I am doing it, but as my role in whatever it was, this is what I was responsible for. Now, again, I had come off of the heels of spending a block of time being at home with the kids. When you look at two people that both work outside the workplace, you're like, okay, well, who assumes that extra role? Because my job isn't solely running the house. My job is also being whatever it is. And so I think that's when the communication standpoints go, these are the things that have to happen. And so these are the things. So who's going to own what? And whether it's we're owning it no backsies, or we're owning it for this season and then we'll reevaluate. Maybe this season you're in charge of landscaping. I don't know whether that means you're doing it yourself or you're getting the long cut or whatever it is that you're doing. And I'm in charge of meals or whatever, but having that communication, because I think we just go on this assumption that it's just going to get done and somebody's going to pick up the slack. And that's where
the problem is.
So
that's where the resentment starts to come in, is when it's based on assumptions, right? Because then you start taking on roles that maybe don't feel good to you, but you're assuming you're supposed to take them on, and then you're frustrated about it. And as you were talking, I was thinking about something that is really important, is that this doesn't actually need to be equal. It needs to be fair. So what research has shown is that if you feel like it's fair, it's fine. So if you're listening and you're thinking, well, I'm my house manager, but I'm okay with it. I'm not resentful. I'm not upset. This is something I like to do, or it's something I have time to do, or it's what makes me feel fulfilled in my family. That's wonderful. That is what you should be doing then. So I don't want anybody to walk away from this and go, am I supposed to be mad about this? No,
right.
Not if it feels fair. The problem is that for some couples, it feels unfair. So a very common example of that would be both people are working 40 hours. And what we've seen is that in couples who both work 40 hours, the woman usually is still taking on almost 100% of what's happening in the home. Mm-hmm. And so what we've got here is we've gotten a shift culturally, where women are starting to take on more work outside of the home, but they haven't shifted out of their work inside of the home. And men have stayed in their same position, where they've continued to work outside of the home, but they've shifted into nothing differently in the home. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, what starts to be the feeling is, this is unfair. This isn't fair to me. I'm exhausted. I didn't sign up for this. And so if you're having the sense of it's not fair, you're not being childish. It's probably not. And that's the second part of the conversation. So awareness is number one. You just need to bring this up, and both of you to read about it and to say, oh yeah, okay, I know what this is. But the second thing is, well, what here doesn't feel fair? Let's just put it on the table. Let's make a list. Eve Roths.
I was just going to say, you're going to talk about fair play. Fair play. Yes.
Fair play.
Yes. Yep. I have it. Yep. I know.
You probably love the exercise. It's very organized.
I love it. Well, it was so funny because after one of my questions, which I'll ask you at the end, which is one of your favorite books, one of my guests months ago had mentioned her book. And so typically what I do is I use this as, whenever guests tell me, oh, I love a book, I go out and buy it. So I got her book and I loved it. And it's funny, even I've been messaging back and forth and our schedules have not been able to align, because I wanted to have her on the show to talk about it. I know, it's so funny. We literally been Instagramming each other, and it's just
so good.
But it's true, because we talk about, that's what she talks about. And so, yes, but for those listeners out there who maybe aren't familiar with it, maybe you could just speak a little bit about what you were going to say.
Eve Rodsky is very much involved with research around the mental load, invisible labor, and how this is really kind of suffocating people in their lives. And she's also really in the same vein of what we've been talking about, which is let's not be critical of our partners, but let's start to take accountability together for how we can start to redistribute all of this, right? And so one of the things that she suggests is that you sit down together and you make different piles of cards of the types of things that you're having to take care of in your home. For example, what are the chores that we have in our house? Let's write them all down. And then let's physically distribute those cards to see who has the bigger stack here and do they feel okay with it? Who takes care of, one of her examples is magic, which I really like. Who takes care of magic in our homes? Magic is the one who makes sure that the house looks cozy, the one who goes and buys the balloons for the birthday party, the one who gets the special plate out. I take care of magic in my home.
Yes.
If my husband and I did the exercise, we would write all these things down. I would end up with the whole deck. But while we're talking, I would say, I love it. Do not dare take it away from me.
Right. Exactly.
This is the part I want. It's fair. But if this was 5 years ago, when we were doing the chore part, my deck would be bigger. And I would say, this isn't fair. You do need to take some of this from me.
Right.
And so that's the second piece that you have to, my ears are a funny shape and my earphones never stand.
I know
It's so weird. But that's the second piece, is you have to be able to sit down and talk about, are our piles fair?
Right.
Then is the redistribution process. And that's, if you say, this pile's great, it feels fair, then you're like, great, let's check in about it though in several months, because you might not like magic anymore in several months, or you might not like those chores. But if something is unfair, then the two of you need to talk about, how do we redistribute? And I'm sure that this is where you help people a lot, which is, maybe it gets redistributed to your partner. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's something you actually don't care about. Maybe you start to say, and this is really hard for people, especially those who take most of the mental load, to say, you know what? I'm actually not going to care about our closets this year, because neither of us have time.
No.
You're like, oh my God, don't say it.
I'm starting to twitch, people. No, but you have to prioritize.
You have to decide what matters.
We have so many hours in a day. And I say this to people all the time, and especially when we talk about calendar clutter, because I do a similar exercise with your schedules, right? So we look at all these things that you are trying to do in a day, because most of us underestimate how long something is going to take us. They're like, that's going to take 5 minutes. That's going to take 20 minutes. And in actuality, it takes 45 minutes or whatever it is, 2 hours, who knows? And so, or we don't factor in all the ancillary things. Like, it takes 20 minutes to drop your kid off at daycare, and then 20 minutes back. And then with the pandemic, when everybody has to be in a car line and all this, everything is longer, we have to get masks and all the things. So we underestimate how long something is going to take us. So when you look at your schedule from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed, how many hours do you have to get stuff done, including all of the, the things like meal prep and driving and whatever you have to do. So when you look at all the things on what you envision, I'm going to accomplish today on my to-do list, and you fall short, people start having this shame and like, I just can't do it. And you're like, the math doesn't add up. When you add up, you're like, if I added up everything that you just did, that equals 16 hours, and I'm making this up, and you only have 12 working hours to be able to actually do it. So it's not a you problem, it's a math problem. And so when you can look at it and go, what we have to work backwards and say, and you can apply this to physical clutter as well, but I think for, you only have so much space in your drawer, in your closet. So your pantry can only comfortably hold 12, cans of whatever. If you go to Costco and buy 24 pack, it's not going to fit. That's a math thing. And so I think with so many times with couples, because especially it all flows in, like you said at the top, the calendar being overscheduled flows into, we're too tired. We're not home enough to deal with the physical stuff. So who does it fall onto? Are we going to say we're okay with neglecting it for a season, which might be the answer? We're okay. We know that our kids are in a lot of things. There's a lot going on. We're just going to be fine. If we've got piles of laundry and in this season, we're not going to worry about it, that's okay. But if you're like, this is a problem, then something else has to give, because you only have so many hours in a day.
Yes, exactly. And something I talk a lot with couples about is that math problem. I will often say to people, this has nothing to do with the two of you. Like, neither of you are like under operating or a messy person or any of that. You literally are deciding, about 1 hour of the day, every single day. Do we clean or do we sit on the couch and hang out together? And that isn't a fair thing to have to decide because you need both. And so the first thing I will say to people is what has to go. And that's really hard for people because there will be grief, anxiety, all sorts of stuff, but it's like something has to give here. So are you going to need to tell your boss that you have to leave work at 5 p.m., even if that means you might make a little less money? If not, then does that mean that your kids have to stop doing all these tennis lessons in the afternoon? If they don't do that, then does it mean that you have to leave the dishes overnight so that you can sit and hang out and be comfortable?
Or does it mean that you hire a high school kid to drive your kid to these activities?
Yeah.
Because you can't be all the things at all the time for everybody, you know?
Totally. And that's the second thing I asked them.
Oh,
so
sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, that's great. The first is, what do we get rid of? And if there's usually some things, right? Like for my husband and I used to just get so freaked out about dishes at night. And like, he had to kind of reality check me and say, literally nothing bad will happen if you get home from work at 8 p.m. and we leave those flipping dishes there and we sit. I promise you, I will wash them, but you got to give me the time to do it in my own time. And you know what? I did. We watch TV, we eat dessert, and that guy cleans them up in the morning at 10 a.m. and we have no problems. It's all okay. I had to let it go that I would have a clean kitchen at night. So that was our example of letting go. Now there's things that I would say I'm not letting go. Like our yard, I will not let that go. I don't care how hard it is for us to deal with, that needs to be taken care of. And so it's outsourced now, right? I don't touch the yard. He doesn't touch the yard. We outsource it, or we have somebody pick up our kid or whatever it is. So the second piece is, what can you outsource? And then the third is, with the pieces you can't outsource, where does it get distributed? What do you do with it? And that's really important for couples to talk about over and over and over again, every several months. How are things going? Where do we want to distribute things? What do we need to cut from our life? And I think that has to do with schedules and physical things.
Totally. I love it. And we're going to take a break because we've been talking I could just talk on non-ending, but we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and I want to pick up on that because I think that is a really, really important piece. So sit tight. So Liz, I think what you hit on again, that we're going to reevaluate in different seasons of our lives, and whether that looks like we're going to sit down and we're going to do it once a month, once a quarter, whatever that looks like. We have whatever our benchmarks are, like that's when we're going to do it. And because our lives are fluid, right? Things are going to happen, and things are going to happen that we don't anticipate. As even the most well laid out plans, everyone knows this, you can only plan so much, and things are going to happen that are going to come up out of the blue. And so being able to be flexible is really important. But I think you touched on something that I want to come back to really quick with, like your dishes thing where you had to let it go. So I think there's an element of, yes. And this I see, especially with my like Enneagram 1 types who are my perfectionists, they want it done their way. And they're the folks that will take on so much because they want it done so perfectly to their standards that it winds up, they become resentful because then everyone finally goes, well, she's just going to do it because that's what she does, or he, either one. But I think it's saying, I'm going to delegate laundry to you, and you might not fold the way I like it, but someone else is doing the laundry. So I'm going to be okay with that and be okay with that. Or on the flip side, if dishes in the sink are a really big thing for you, like I'm the like I could not go to sleep. I could be fine with laundry sitting in a laundry basket, but dishes in a sink, I need to come down in the morning to a sink that's empty. So if I knew I was going to be working at night, I would communicate with my spouse saying, this is really important to me. Can you please make sure, because it's important to me. It's about how it makes me feel. If I wake up and I come downstairs to a sink full of dishes, I already feel like I'm behind the 8 ball. It already is causing me stress. And it's not about the dishes per se. It's about all of these things of setting the tone and being able to communicate that to my husband, and I'm making this up, right? You come home at 6 o'clock. I don't get home till late. It would be really huge because it would make me so much happier. And then the hope is that your spouse understands the value that that has for you coming home, and that they will go, oh, because you might be going, what's the big deal? It's just some dirty dishes. It's not going to hurt anybody. And yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to hurt anybody. But if it's causing you stress and anxiety, that's trickling over into relational things, then it is a problem. And then that's something that hopefully in that communication piece with spouses, that they understand that even though it's not important to me, it's important to my co-partner. And so I'm going to make it a priority.
Yes. And I like that you brought up the example to contrast my example, because I think something that's really important for people to remember is that everybody is different. And so there is actually not a right or wrong way to go through these steps. Your partner might say, it is a non-negotiable for the dishes for me.
Right.
That is my thing. And that's that third list of things. Like we have to figure out how to delegate these, because I can't let that thing go. Right.
Yep.
That is not in my pile of, this is a season in our lives and I'm just going to let it go. Right. For me, the dishes was like, this is a season in our lives and I'm not going to fight it. But there are things that are not a season in our lives. And I'm like, no, even though it's not important to you. My husband, he truly doesn't notice when there's weeds in the garden. He just doesn't. It will keep me up at night. I feel like incredibly upset about it when I drive up to the house and I see like grass that's a little long, or like the springtime throws me over the edge.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Dandelions, crabgrass. It
is a mess. Nothing looks good, but he doesn't notice, and he truly doesn't. And we've had to have conversations where I say, I know it's not important to you. And I know if you lived in a house by yourself, that it wouldn't matter. And I also trust that you would eventually cut the grass and all of that would happen. But for me, it actually is very upsetting to me. It feels rude to our neighbors. It feels out of control. It feels like it becomes expensive. I need us to take this seriously, and it needs to be taken care of as it comes up. And he was able to say, yeah, I could care less about it, or I couldn't care less about it. And I am going to call a landscaper. This, though, is something that can take people time, right? You might say to your partner, I really care about the dishes, and you might get home, and they might say, you want them to have a non-defensive response. So hopefully they say, I get that, I'll take care of them. But there might be a time in 3 weeks where you get home and those dishes are there. And your response needs to be encouraging towards what you want.
So that's great. So can you give some language? Because I see this, and it might not even be 3 weeks. It might be 2 days later. Like
totally,
and I've had people go, the only way my spouse does something is if I yell and scream, and then they do it more to just shut me up, not because they really want to do it. So what are some, and then also the other thing, so I want you to give language for like, if they don't do it, but then also the fact that I think a lot of people, because again, it's learned behavior, and these strategies take time. A partner may very well say, Liz, get over it. Like, it's just the lawn. Who cares? Who cares what the neighbors think? And diminish what's important to you. And it's, again, less about the lawn or the dishes. You now are like, I'm not being heard. And they're like, oh, you're overreacting.
Totally. I mean, and we've all done this, right? Like I've done this to my partner, I'm sure many times, where he's
People's Exhibit A right here. So
yeah. And like, because I think what he's worried about is silly, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you haven't done X, Y, and Z for the car. And I'm like, I'll get to the car when I get to the car. But, it's my job as his partner to learn how to get better at saying, one thing I suggest to people is look at it as, this is the point of partnership, is that your partner notices things that you don't, and it should make your life better because of that. And so can you move into the frame of mind when you're feeling defensive to be able to say, I'm pretty lucky to have a partner that cares about a car, because I could care less. couldn't care less.
I know
always do it the wrong way.
we all do that. It's
Yeah.
like,
But I really couldn't care about the car.
right.
But I'm really lucky to have a partner that does. And instead of me getting to a place where it's like, oh, why are you bothering me with this? Being able to say, thanks for bringing that up is a really important way to respond. Now, if you bring up something to your partner and they get defensive and they say, why are you bugging me about that? Or don't you know how hard I work all day? Or are you kidding? I thought that that's why we hire cleaning people. You know, why do we have to keep dealing with the dust? Doesn't somebody else deal? Whatever it is, you're bringing up a complaint. Complaints are really normal in relationships. And one thing that you can do as the complainer is to make sure you're bringing up your complaint in a way that's non-critical. Because if you're critical, it's going to bring up defensiveness.
For sure.
So if you say things like always, never, you, and talk about a flaw within them, you're always lazy, you're not going to get the response you want. But if you know that you said it to your partner in a fair way that was direct, and it was just like, hey, the dishes really bother me. I need help with them. I would really appreciate if you would start cleaning them up. Can you agree to do that? And they say something like, you're so dramatic.
Yeah,
right?
right.
You like, are you kidding? I've lived my whole life with dishes in the sink. You're so OCD. So they get defensive, they criticize you, whatever. That's a boundary violation actually in a relationship. And so it's not just about the dishes, but at that point, it's actually about the interaction. And the first place you need to set the boundary is the interaction. I am allowed to complain in this relationship. And when I bring up issues to you, it is really important to me that you hear them and that you do not criticize me. So I'm going to try to bring this up to you again and have a limit with the person. Don't go down their path. Don't say, wow, you're such a jerk for saying that, or see, you never listen to me, because then you're going to go back in the defensiveness critical cascade. Right. But stand your ground and say, excuse me, I just brought up a complaint to you. I am not criticizing you. I am not going to go down that path. I love you. I want our house to feel good. But for me to feel good, I need to be able to tell you what's wrong. You don't have to talk to your spouse with a gentle tone all of the time, or you can be strong and have a backbone about these things. So that's the first, is how do you put a limit on interactions that are demeaning, dismissive, and rude? And I'm not saying that that's always the first place you go. You know, my husband says, Liz, who cares about the yard? I'm not going to say, excuse me, the first time. Right. I'll say, I care about the yard. But if he says you're a drama queen or I'm going to say, excuse me, do not speak to me that way. And I really want to encourage people to do that if you have a dismissive partner.
I love this. And I'm sitting here, and anybody that's like watching on YouTube, you see me looking down, it's like I'm taking notes because it's so gold. But I think again, and I'm a huge proponent of therapy, individual therapy, couples therapy. Everyone knows, like, I think it's great. And again, specifically, I see it so much in a lot of the tension that I see with clients and what I do. I'm like, these are communications. Like, there's a lack of communication tools to, that people need. So how helpful, I know I'm giving you kind of an underhanded pitch, right? Because I see the value, but I think a lot of times this is where there's a value in having that third neutral party in there to come in there. Now, obviously you've got letters and accolades after your name. So you have actual like science knowledge base that give you the tools. But when you're in that emotional back and forth with your spouse, it's very hard to, I think, and especially if it's been an ongoing pattern of behavior for could be decades, to even know how to take a step back and start developing these other healthy boundaries. So that's where I feel like a therapist can be pivotal in making that change. So I was wondering if you could just kind of lead into that, because I think there's just others before you do, because I think there's this stigma also that, again, going back to the initial stereotypes, that people have to be on the verge of divorce or they have to be in a complete crisis. And that is just false. Like that's fake news. So I'm just
total fake news. You know, I work with a ton of people that, yes, they come in crisis, but I've also seen the trend change where a lot of people are coming in because they're recognizing that it's getting hard, right? So they're saying, you know what, we got in a really weird fight. We clearly need some words that we can use a little differently, and we need this third person. And the great part of a couples therapist is that we want the relationship to be healthy. So we're not on either person's side. We're on the side of the relationship. And so when two people come in, we can say, hey, I see that this is what this person's going through. Can you hear that? We can help advocate for the person who might be being dismissed. And we can help advocate for the person that's dismissing as well, because something under there is happening too, right? And
Sure.
being able to move from that boundary conversation of, hey, don't dismiss your partner right now, I need you to listen. And then to the next part, which is, well, what's preventing you from doing the dishes like you said you would? What's
Right.
getting in the way?
Right.
Let's find a win-win, because I also don't want the partner who's not doing the dishes to just suck it up. I want the partner who's not doing the dishes to figure out how that can make sense in their lives so that they don't feel resentful either. And what you might hear is, well, I'm tired too. I actually really value playing with my kids. And if I only have 2 hours at the end of the day, I'm going to play with my kids. I really value cooking dinner, and I can't do that and this. So then after you can create, and the couples therapist can help with that, when you can create a conversation that's actually safe and functioning, then you can move into really understanding each other. And you can move into being able to say, okay, I get that your perspective is that the last thing at the end of the day you want to do is dishes because you want to color with the kids, and that's valuable.
Or
And
worse, like, I just want to come home and sit and have a beer. Like, at least the coloring with the kids, you're doing something like productive, but like,
totally.
I know
So
a lot
some
of
people might say,
like,
I want to come home.
Right. And I just want to chill out. And it's like, hello, we
And
have like
as a
things to do.
therapist, what I could help that person to express is, I need rest in my life, and I need time to be. And then we figure out, how do you create what both people need in a win-win? So it's not that you just sit down and have a beer and you let your partner suffer, but it's also not that you make the house all about cleaning all of the time.
Right.
It's that you figure out, how do we then get you enough rest and time with a beer, and also make sure the kitchen is clean? Both need to happen. And one of the things I talk about in my book a lot is that, unfortunately, in relationships, we create a lot of no-win situations where it's either my way and I'm winning and you're suffering, or it's your way and you're winning and I'm suffering. And that happens all the time with this household clutter stuff.
I see it, and I love it. And I love what you said. And I'm going to use this. I will give you credit, but I'm using this in a quote. I love it. You're like, I'm on the side of the relationship. It's not right, wrong, his, hers. It's, if we are both, and we're going on the assumption that we're not talking about couples that are getting ready for divorce, like that you've other things and like somebody's checked out. We're just going on the assumption of like, you're together and you're just dealing with life, right? You're dealing with all that life has. And at the end of the day, you both want this relationship to work, but you just have different priorities and different, again, ways of expressing your stuff, different love languages, different Enneagram types, like all those things. And so having those communication tools of saying, this is really important to me, my Enneagram, my love language is acts of service, and my husband's is physical touch or time or whatever. And I'm just like, no, I need you to show me that you love me by doing the laundry or whatever. He does that on his own because we call him laundry loving Josh, because he's like weirdly obsessed with laundry.
I need laundry loving Josh.
Oh, laundry loving. Everyone needs laundry loving Josh. It's a whole thing. I've unpacked that from my fake therapy. I think it's from years of growing up in an apartment because he grew up in Manhattan and they didn't have a washer dryer.
Oh.
And so I really think they look at it as like, it's like and because when my mother-in-law comes, my sister-in-law comes, they like they do laundry as soon as they get to my house. Like, it's weird.
That is the luckiest thing
I know
anybody could ever get.
I know. So we give laundry loving Josh like grace. That's his thing. But my point is, like, you talk about like what is, we're on the side of this relationship to work, and whether this is important to you or this is, Josh might be like, I forgot where I was going for a second, but we were talking about the love languages. And I was saying, he's like, I want you to spend time with me, and you're cleaning the kitchen. It's like, or whatever I'm filling in the blanks, I'm making this up. But again,
that is a very common dynamic,
and it's
I want us to be together and
yes.
You just want us to work.
Yes. Yes. And I see that. And again, it's how can you incorporate the both and in your relationship? How can we do both? How can we not have the house be in disarray? Because that stresses me out. And then that also sets us up for being behind the 8 ball tomorrow, but without it compromising our quality time together in our relationship. And I think that's so common, I see from my perspective. And obviously you say you see it on yours too.
Yes. And you're using the word and, right? And so by moving from you just want to sit on your butt and watch TV and moving instead to you want to rest, you want to have time to decompress, you want to hang out with me. And instead of saying all you ever care about is cleaning the house and you're just so ridiculous about that, being able to say you want peace, you want organization, that helps you relax. How can we get that to happen? And something I coach people to do is to be able to talk about the underneath. And so I think that's the last little tip, is being able to say, if I get this, then what do I get because of it? So when the dishes are clean, I get what? If you can express that to another person, they're way more understanding.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like
go for it. No,
finish what you were going to say. And then because I have a whole thing about that, but finish what
you're
going to say.
So if you can say to your partner, if I say to my husband, when the grass is cut and the weeds are cleared, I feel better. I feel like I can play more. I feel relaxed. I feel less anxious. That's what my husband cares about.
Right.
I'm not going to get him to care about the yard. My husband wants me happy. And so when I say, if I have that, I have a sense of peace, he's like, oh, okay. If he says to me, when I sit and watch TV by myself for 45 minutes at night, I feel revitalized. I feel like I've had time to think. I have then more space to clean. I whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then I go, oh my gosh, I've got George. We're going to go off, watch as much TV as you want, because I want you to have that. So if you're getting gridlocked on, well, I want it this way. No, I want it this way. I want you to pause and say, if you get it that way, then what? Help me understand. Because when you can express that, if your partner wants a healthy relationship with you, they're going to go, oh, I don't want you stressed.
Right. Right. I love it. And I was just going to say, I used to use that strategy with my kids when they were younger. So laundry loving Josh used to travel a ton. Yeah. He used to travel. And I've said this before on the show, but for newer listeners, I was at home with the kids doing all the things. And as I said, dishes are a big thing for me. And when my kids were younger, like they would help like clear the table or whatever, but they would want my attention after dinner, whether it was we were going to watch a TV show, we were going to play a game, whatever we were going to do. And I would say to them, if you help me, this has to get done because this is important, right? This is Team Palau knows that we have to clean up the dishes, right? That has to get done. Like that was a non-negotiable. So I can do it myself. Or if you guys want to help me, or you can clean up the toys while I do this, then we'll have more time together because this has to happen. And it was then like, when this is done, we can sit down and play a game or watch TV or whatever it was that we were going to do. And so they had the buy-in and they understood the why behind it. And I felt like that really help them understand and then go, oh, well, I'll help. Because again, we all want our, spouses or our kids to be like, sure, I'm just going to come in and pick up the toys. But if you say, hey, listen, if you help me pick up the toys while I'm doing the dishes, we'll get done quicker and that'll give us more time to play.
Yeah. And it'll make me in a more playful mood. Like,
correct.
I will not just be playing and be angry.
Yes.
I'm going to
yes.
feel as fun as you feel.
Yes. Yes. And I think
that's
again,
the part that gets to people.
yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you for days and days and days on this, but we are going to kind of tie this up with a nice, neat bow. Tell our listeners, where can they learn more? Where can they follow you? The book, if they live in the area and they want to to hire you for your services, all the things.
Yeah. So the easiest place to find me is Instagram at Liz Listens. It's where I share a lot of relationship advice. I wrote a book called I Want This to Work, and it's available everywhere books are sold. So wherever you like to buy your books, you can purchase it there. If you are interested in working with a couples therapist in a more traditional way, there's Better Life Therapy, which is betterlifetherapy.com. And if you're in the premarital phase of your relationship, you can go to With Ours, which is OURS.com, and you can do a really fun premarital program. It's fun and playful and creative. And it is meant to kind of destigmatize that this is not got to be all serious. You can plan your relationship together in a way that is playful and exciting.
I love it. It's great. And again, marriage, couples therapy, counseling, it's just like we hire trainers, we hire organizers, we hire nutrition experts. Like we don't always have, and a lot of us didn't have necessarily maybe the healthiest modeled behaviors growing up. And so you don't have those tools, and getting somebody to help you navigate this again, before you get to the point where you're like, I want to divorce my spouse. Like if you see these, cracks along the way, go get some tools, in your toolbox, people. And that's my soapbox on that. All right. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to just put you in the hot seat for our wrap up questions. So sit tight, Liz. So thank you so much for this. Well, of course, we'll link to everything in our show notes so that people can find you, follow you, reach out to you, connect with you, all the things. So aside from your book, which I can't wait to read because I haven't read it, but I am going to read it. We always like to ask our guests if there's a book that you either come back to or that you refer to people that has been transformational in it could be your personal life, it could be professionally, a little bit of both, but just something that you're like, yeah, this is like a go-to book for me.
I definitely think Fair Play, based off of the topic so Eve's getting a lot of shout outs on your podcast.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to tag her in this episode and be like, all right, Eve.
It's just, I think that it is a huge issue for relationships right now. And so I recommend it again and again and again, because it is very eye-opening. There's another book called Fed Up, which is about the same topic that I really like. I forget the author's name at this moment. But same topic of just being exhausted with the mental load, the physical labor in the home, all of that kind of stuff. And then I recommend all of the Gottman books. So you've got Fair Play right there.
I was like, I had to find it. Yes. I was like, Fair Play, for anybody on YouTube, this is what it looks like. There it is. So
yeah, it's a great book for this topic. And it's organized in a very nice way.
It is. It's an easy read. It's not academic.
Totally. And then I also always recommend the Gottman books. Okay. So the Principles of Making Marriage Work, but really any of the Gottman books are really great because they have very tangible skills, which I think is when it comes to couples therapy or couples issues, people need behavioral skills first. And then like the flowery stuff is nice second, but I always suggest get some tools in your toolbox, like templates, scripts, things you can mimic so that starts to feel natural. So I love those would be my recs.
I love them. Those are great recs. And we'll link up to all of those in our show notes for people so they can easily find them. And then our final two questions that we ask every guest all the time, because we know that life is fluid. We go through seasons where sometimes we feel like we are thriving in certain areas and other times we feel like a hot mess. So in this season of your life, when it comes to organization, and this could be physical organization, it could be calendar organization. Where do you feel the most organized and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
Oh, I love this question. I feel the most organized with work. So that feels very organized. I delegate to a lot of people. My calendar is starting to calm down. I have methods for dealing with all my emails. Like that is starting to feel really, really good. I feel the least organized with clutter.
There you go.
Particularly laundry. I'm just like, what? Josh, please come to my house.
I was going to say, I'm going to have, yes.
And my husband is actually very good at doing it, but we just don't know where to put it. We're like, what do we do with all this crap? We hate folding. We need to throw it all, not throw it away, take it to Goodwill.
I was going to say, maybe we need to do an edit of what our inventory is first to see.
We need an edit.
We're gonna take this offline for people, so we don't have to let them. But we're gonna talk about how we're gonna do an edit of the laundry, and then say, what do we? Because I don't enjoy it either. So if I'm like, yeah, I'm not a fan. So I feel you, sister. I feel you. Well, again, Liz, thank you so much. Thank you for the incredible work that you are putting out in the world and that you are, again, normalizing this, because again, this is something that we all at some point, I don't care how great and healthy and wonderful your marriage is, we all have communication breakdowns, and it's so helpful to be able to have resources that we can go to, people like you. So I appreciate that. And thank you for coming on our show. If this is your first time tuning into our show, please, welcome first of all, but click the like, subscribe, follow button wherever you are. We've got tons of episodes and resources for you. So please go back into our back catalog, follow us on social media at Simply Be Organized. And if there's a topic that you want to hear, shoot us a DM or a message, and let us know, because again, living an organized life is more than just the bins and the baskets. It's really about looking at all of these other relational components. So we love that you're here, and we hope to see you next week. Until then, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love by sharing it with your friends. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so that you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth a listen. Head on over to YouTube and make sure that you follow us there as well. We record interviews, videos, and conversations with all of our guests. And again, if you want to learn more about our product offerings, feel free to visit us at simplybeorganized.com, where you can connect with me.